going on, guys? This is HitPause here with a fairly quick tutorial on something that I just did that I just thought was fun and funny enough to show everybody, and I'll show you guys how I did it really quick. So if you see here, I have this pissant that's standing in front of us here, and I also have a death character here. Death is actually not part of this, so let's go ahead and move him off the screen. What happens here is when I hit the B key, yes, okay, that was a little loud, so let me go ahead and fix that really quick. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so let's play it again. I'll show you what happens if I hit the B key. Boosh. So basically we split him in half, and I don't have the particles or any guts coming out of him yet, but I will. So I'll show you guys quickly how it was done. First off, the most important thing here is that we actually have some assets. Okay, I actually have an asset of him cut in half with his upper body, and obviously we also have his lower body, and they do in fact fit together. Now let me show you the assets here in Max fairly quickly. If I take the upper torso here, you can see that it is like this, and there's also his head, and then he's got his hat and his eyes and whatnot, and then his hands here. Okay, so that is exported, and then if I can also show the entire skeleton. So now if you look, you'll notice that when I exported this, I exported it like this with everything in here. So if I show the skeleton for this, click on the root bone, you'll see that the entire skeleton is actually here. That way it takes on the initial pose and it matches cleanly. It's a fairly seamless transition. If I hit the key, you'll notice that his legs stay in roughly the same spot. Okay, and then they go and die. Alright, so everything maintains its position. The other thing that I have that's also very important here is I have unique physics assets for these, because if you take a look at the way that this simulates, you can see that it's the entire body, right? So if I were to come to my peon here and say take his upper body and tell this asset change, well, I can't do it during simulate. If I change mesh and I'll say yes, if you notice, okay, it does fit him, but if I simulate this, see how his body takes on kind of an unnatural bounce, and you'll notice that his legs are still there. They're causing a bit of a spaz out. So what I did was I duplicated that physics asset excuse me, and I went in and deleted all of the bodies that weren't actually associated with this piece of the mesh. And I also did the same thing for the lower body. I went in and I deleted the parts of the upper torso. So you can just select a body and hit delete. And like I said, all I did was take this guy and duplicate it and renamed it, and then made sure that it got assigned the associated mesh. So let's take a look at the code really quick. It's fairly simple. If you know what you're doing in UE4 already, you don't need to watch this, because you're not going to really get surprised. There's a few things here though that happened that I can hopefully warn you guys about. So essentially, when I say cut in half here, I run through a sequence. Now let me take a look in the viewport here. Ignore the scythe here, that's part of the gameplay. It gets hidden and unhidden based on whether or not he's possessed. But I have a separate head mesh and I have a regular mesh here, okay? So when we go into the graph, the first thing I do is I disable collision on those, okay, in case they had collision, and then I set them to hidden. That's the very first thing that happens, right? Because we want to hide the things that are there. We don't want to destroy them because we need to reference them here in a little bit. For instance, right here. So what we do is we add a skeletal mesh component, right? Because these have ragdolls, they have bones, they're animated, so they need to have this component. It needs to be a skeletal mesh. Okay, I didn't want to make them separate actors. I just put the components in here, and we get the relative transform of the mesh itself. Okay, which is basically the body, and I store that as a variable so that I don't have to keep dragging this pin everywhere. We set the skeletal mesh. In this case, it is the peon severed upper body here. Okay, and then we set its anim instance class, which is its animation blueprint. As you can see here, it's the third person animation blueprint that comes with it, and that's the same one that I picked here. Okay, that causes it to take on the same pose as its as whatever the character was doing at the moment. Alright, we set a physics asset, okay, to the upper torso physics. We need a delay. It's important. It can glitch out or crash or not even work if you don't do a delay. Then we do a set all bodies simulate physics, and that's the important part. That'll get it to ragdoll. This just can help in case some of the bodies happen to be asleep. Now for the upper body, I add a bit of an impulse in basically the Z direction. So I take the severed torso, get its world rotation, I get the up vector, so whichever way is pointing up in the world, multiply it by 5,000. This has to compensate for the mass of the character. If I were impulsing the entire character, it would need to be higher, but if you remember, I cut half of his body off, so he officially weighs less. Okay, all those bodies in the physics asset, they all add up. Okay. So we add the impulse, and then I give it an angular impulse randomly between -1,000 and 1,000, telling that to be a velocity change. Okay, so not a force, but a velocity change, and that's what causes the upper torso to fly off and kind of spin in different directions. Now the lower body is essentially the exact same thing, just put a very minor delay on it. We add a skeletal mesh here, just exactly the same, and we set the variable to severed legs. Okay. Again, we use the relative transform of the mesh. By the way, relative transform in this case will be -91.4. Okay, because it's relative to this actor's origin. All right, that's what that means. But remember, we're adding a component which is also inside of this actor, so that is relative to the actor's origin, so we need it. You'll notice when you do any kind of add component, you actually only get relative transform. So it's basically saying, where is it inside of this actor if this actor was the world? Okay, again, set the skeletal mesh, P on severed limbs, set the anim class, same anim class, okay? That's third person anim. We set the physics asset, lower body physics. Again, this was upper torso physics. I had to make separate physics assets. They won't behave. It works with the the whole entire body, but it just doesn't look right. And in this case, I delay it for a little bit longer. Okay, I put a 0.01 delay before the upper body gets activated, but I put a little bit of a longer delay on the legs so that they stand there for just a split second. Makes it a little bit more funny. Then again, set all bodies simulate physics, wake all rigid bodies, and we're done. That's it. That's the whole thing. Now, I want to make it a point. Now, this part I'm not entirely sure is true. When you add the skeletal mesh component, you can fill in the mesh here. You can tell it to simulate physics. You can tell it to start awake. You can set the physics asset. You can do everything I'm doing here inside of here. However, for some weird reason, it didn't work. Okay, so the other thing is I am setting the anim instance class, and you would think, if you watch my old videos, that I could set the master pose component, which does work. You can set the master pose component, but as soon as you simulate physics and wake all rigid bodies, it will simulate, but the ragdoll itself will not activate. It will be as if it is a stiff static mesh. So what you have to do is, after you simulate, or you would think before, because the thing is if you set the master pose component and then you set the master pose component to null, to nothing, it immediately goes back to T pose. It doesn't stay in its initial pose. It goes back to T pose. So you can tell the master pose component after you simulate physics to set it to null, and that works. But 1 out of every 2 times it crashes the editor completely. I'm talking 1 out of 2, 50% of the time that you test, it'll crash the editor. So it's not stable. It doesn't work. It looks like it works because when it doesn't crash, it works exactly the same as what I'm doing here. But whenever you're going to do something like this, where you're going to immediately set it to physics, because remember, physics are kind of a bear, right? They're uncontrollable, they're unreliable, and they're actually a little bit more prone to crash. So in this case, we use an animation blueprint here, and then that solves that problem. I'll show you in Max really quick how I went about cutting the mesh apart. Okay, so what I'll do is I will take the let's say the upper torso severed here, and I'll isolate that really quick. Okay, so let's say I wanted to cut the arm off of this guy. So all I need to do is clone him, okay, as a copy, and we'll say left arm severed. Okay, come over here, go to the editable poly modifier. Remember, this is left arm severed. Now I'll take this loop here and make sure that it goes down. Let's go ahead and isolate this one. Okay, make sure we go all the way around the loop. Okay, like so, and then I'll hit split. Okay, and this is because this is the arm severed. I'll take these two elements and delete them. Okay, so there we're left with this. Alright, and then we go by the border here and just hold shift, okay, and hit R for the scale tool. Hold shift, grab in the center, and just drag that down. And I tend to do it once, twice, and then I'll either push this one out or in, depending. In this case I'll push it in, and then I'm going to do that one more time, and then I hit collapse. Okay, then what we do is we come here, we just pick the middle vert, hold control to convert that into polygons. We'll hit grow, and then let's make sure that's on another smoothing group. Okay, and then we'll hit shrink one more time, and I do have a separate material here for called gore. We assign that. Okay, and that's it. That's all I did. Now you can put a texture on there, you can do whatever you want, but that's the very simple way to do it. And you can see that the upper torso is still intact if I hide the severed arm here. Alright, so we need the torso, and then we have the severed arm. And if I take a look at the animation here, Max still maintains the skin weights, okay? So everything's good. You can see here that it'll still follow. It still maintains all those skin weights. It may or may not be a little wonky. You know, you probably want to make sure that these pieces are like more rigid to it, so you may want to reskin them if you want to. But in this, because in this case, if it drifts really far away from the origin, there's a small chance that some of these get left behind. So just test it. If it needs adjustment on the skin weights, adjust the skin weights. But for the most part, this works fairly fine, because you got to remember that this is the only bone that's affecting it. So that is how I did it. That's how I cut the pieces off. It's the same thing. Like, I can go here to the decapitated head, and you can see that I just did the same thing. Okay, just cut along the edges that were already there, split it, deleted everything else, just basically capped it, but I did it by cloning the edges in one time, and then one more time to collapse it, and that's all I did. Okay, and same thing if we want to go with the like, say, the neck, decapitated neck here. Okay, it's the same edge. So if I look at the head and the neck together, okay, and we take a look here, you can see that they fit. I cut along the same seam. Alright, and then you just export them. So if I were to want to export this severed arm here, I would actually come here, and what I would do would be, I don't want the upper torso, I want left arm severed. So what I would do is, because I don't want this arm here, I would actually, this is called body hands, so what I would actually do would be to clone this and call this body left hand. Okay, and then I would say come here, click on there, and I just go over here, and I would delete that other arm and make sure I reapply the skin modifier. And then on the body hands, I would now change the name to body right hand. Okay, and in this case we would get rid of the left hand. Okay, we turn that off, go back to the skin modifier. So with both of them here, we can see that he's still intact, but I would just get rid of the right hand. I would show the skeleton here, and then select all, export, okay, to FBX, and that's it. That's all you got to do. And then again, you'd want to go in and make sure that you delete all the other bodies. Now, you may be able to get away with just grabbing the bones that are associated with it, but you probably won't be able to run the animation blueprint the way it is. So I tend to keep the whole skeleton. I haven't tested it yet, whether or not you can remove the bones from the selection. You probably can, because they are named the same, and it's basically a name association. So anyways, there you go. If I show it one more or three more times because it's funny, go boom, Okay, flies off. Come here again, boom. Alright, play again, boom. And then it's pretty good. And also, if in my particular case, I can actually take control of him. If I kill him, I actually regain control of my character here. Okay, and I did that by running a last thing called force unpossess, which essentially just repossesses the death character. Okay, so get the controller of this mesh, which would be me at this point, and get death character and possess that. And death does get attached to him, so I just make sure that death gets detached, and that's it. So that's fairly simple. So again, force unpossess only happens if this character's controller is a player controller. So we get controller, cast to player controller. If it is, go through. That way, when it runs force unpossess, and say I'm not controlling him and he happens to die because somebody else triggered a trap, doesn't ruin my control of the character, doesn't reinitialize me, or doesn't take me out of controlling another peon. So if I come here and I say add another peon, I need to make sure this is a 2D game, so, well, it's not 2D, but it's 2D controls. So if I take control of this guy and I hit, well, actually that was, I killed the wrong guy. If I take control of this guy and I kill him, I'm still in control. Okay, still in control. I need to disable the collision on him, on his capsule. I haven't done that yet, so that was kind of a mistake on my part, but no big deal. I still have the ability to possess and unpossess the other characters. It's completely separate, and all I really need to do is on this piece right here, I can just come in, grab the capsule, and add that to the collision, hit compile, come here, hit play, just kill that guy off, and we can run right through. Okay, if you wanted to, you could make it so that these pieces got kicked around by the other guys, but I don't want that kind of overhead. It almost looks like his torso's breathing, doesn't it? That's kind of creepy. That's just the physics, not dying. So that's it. Hopefully you guys found that funny and useful. If you guys need any help with it, or are doing something cool and want me to see it, I do love seeing stuff. Just let me know, and I'll sign off, and I'll see you guys in the next one.